At 11:40 a.m. on October 2, 2018, a white 2015 Prevost tour bus was descending the $1 million highway south of Ouray, Colorado. It was operated by a small charter company based in Durango. The driver, a 57-year-old man with over 20 years of commercial driving experience, was carrying 27 passengers, most of them tourists from central Mexico on a guided fall foliage tour. The road was dry. The sky was clear. The autumn colors were at their peak. Everything seemed normal. The highway at that point is known as U.S. Route 550, but the stretch between Silverton and Ouray has a reputation that precedes it. It runs through the San Juan Mountains at elevations above 11,000 feet with sheer cliffs dropping hundreds of feet on one side and vertical rock walls on the other. There are no guardrails in many sections. The lanes are narrow. The curves are tight. The road was built in the 1880s as a wagon route for silver and gold mining, and it has never been widened to modern standards. At 11:42 a.m., the bus entered a left-hand curve known as the Bear Creek Falls section. This is a particularly tight bend where the road crests a small rise and then begins a steep downgrade. Witnesses in vehicles behind the bus later reported seeing the bus drift slightly toward the outside of the curve. It crossed the double yellow line by about a foot, then corrected. The driver tapped the brakes. The bus straightened, then it entered the next curve. At 11:43 a.m., something was off. The bus did not turn enough. It continued straight toward the rock wall on the right. The driver overcorrected. The bus swung left across both lanes, then right again. The rear wheels caught the gravel shoulder. The bus tilted. There was no guardrail at that spot. At 11:44 a.m., the bus went over the edge. It fell roughly 150 feet down a rocky slope, tumbling twice before coming to rest against a stand of pine trees. 4 people were killed instantly. 19 others were hospitalized with injuries ranging from broken backs to crushed ribs. The driver survived with minor cuts. What happened? The crash occurred in a remote canyon. Emergency crews from Ouray and Silverton responded within 30 minutes, but the terrain made extraction difficult. The bus was too damaged to lift out by helicopter. Victims had to be carried up the slope on stretchers. The road was closed for 2 days. Investigators from the Colorado State Patrol and the National Transportation Safety Board arrived on scene the following afternoon. They examined the bus, the road surface, the driver's logs, and the vehicle's maintenance records. They also interviewed the driver. The driver said he had driven the $1 million highway dozens of times over the previous decade. He knew the curves. He said he entered the curve at about 25 miles per hour, which is within the posted advisory speed of 30 miles per hour for that section. He felt the bus drift slightly and tried to correct, but the steering felt heavy. He said he pumped the brakes, but the bus did not slow as expected. Investigators later found that the brake system on the bus had a known design issue. The air brake chambers had moisture contamination, which caused reduced braking force when the brakes were applied repeatedly on a long downgrade. The driver had not been trained on that specific failure mode. The bus company had not performed the required annual brake inspection on that vehicle. The maintenance record showed a gap of 14 months, but the investigation did not stop at the bus. It widened to the road itself. The $1 million highway has a history of fatal accidents. Between 2000 and 2018, the 54-mile stretch between Durango and Ouray recorded 31 deaths. That is a death rate roughly 4 times higher than the national average for similar 2-lane mountain roads. The Colorado Department of Transportation had studied the corridor multiple times. They identified over 60 locations where guardrails were missing or insufficient. They found dozens of curve radius issues that did not meet modern design standards. They flagged rockfall zones that had not been stabilized, but improvements were slow. The highway is designated as a scenic byway and a National Forest Service road, meaning any widening or guardrail installation requires federal environmental review, archaeological clearances, and coordination with multiple agencies. The process can take years. The deeper question became why a road so clearly dangerous had been left with so few safety upgrades. The answer is partly financial. Installing a continuous guardrail along the most vulnerable sections of the $1 million highway was estimated in 2015 at $40 million. The state had funding for smaller projects but not for a full corridor overhaul. The priority list put other roads ahead of this one, even though the fatality rate was higher. The political will to spend that much money on a road used primarily by tourists in summer and fall was limited. Locals argued that the road had always been dangerous and that drivers should simply be more careful. But careful driving does not prevent mechanical failure. It does not prevent rockfalls. It does not prevent a driver from misjudging a curve that has no warning signs about the severity of the drop. The $1 million highway has no rumble strips on the outside edges. It has no continuous cable barriers. It has no median dividers. In many places, the only thing between a vehicle and a 500-foot vertical drop is a 2-foot gravel shoulder. The National Transportation Safety Board, in its final report on the 2018 bus crash, noted that while the immediate cause was brake failure, the severity of the outcome was directly linked to the absence of roadside barriers. Had a guardrail been present at that curve, the bus would have been contained, the fall would have been prevented, and the 4 deaths could have been avoided. How could this have happened? The Million-Dollar Highway is not a secret. It appears on lists of America's most dangerous roads every year. Travel blogs warn drivers about it. Rental car companies in Durango often advise customers to avoid driving it at night or in bad weather. The Colorado Department of Transportation itself publishes a brochure titled Driving the San Juan Skyway, which includes a section titled Be Aware. The Million-Dollar Highway is a challenging drive. The brochure recommends using low gears on descents, staying in your lane, and pulling over if you feel nervous. But the brochure does not tell drivers that some sections have no escape ramps, no shoulders, and no barriers. The road was originally built in the 1880s by miners who needed a way to transport ore from the silver mines around Silverton to the smelters in Durango. It was a dirt track wide enough for a single wagon. In the 1820s, it was paved and widened to 2 lanes, but the alignment followed the original route. The curves were not redesigned for modern vehicle dynamics. The grades were not flattened. The road was essentially a 19th-century path with 20th-century asphalt. It was designated a National Scenic Byway in 1996, which protected its historic character but also limited the kinds of safety improvements that could be made. The name Million-Dollar Highway itself is part of the problem. It is a nickname that draws tourists. The origin of the name is disputed. Some say it comes from the cost of building the road, which was estimated at $1 million in the 1920s. Others say it refers to the gold and silver ore that was hauled along the route, worth millions. Still others say it comes from the million-dollar views. Whatever the origin, the name sells tickets. Thousands of people drive it every year in rental cars, RVs, motorcycles, and tour buses. Many of them have never driven a mountain road like this before. They are not prepared for the exposure, the narrowness, or the lack of safety features. Investigators who studied the 2018 bus crash also looked at the driver's route planning. The bus was on a 5-day tour from Albuquerque to Moab. The driver had the discretion to choose a different route. He could have taken US 160 east through Wolf Creek Pass and then north on US 84 to Moab, which would have avoided the Million-Dollar Highway entirely. That route adds only 40 minutes of driving time and uses a road with wider lanes, better shoulders, and guardrails throughout. The driver said he chose the Million-Dollar Highway because it was the most scenic route and he had driven it before. He did not consider the added risk of a heavy commercial vehicle on a road designed for passenger cars. The bus company did not have a policy prohibiting its drivers from taking the Million-Dollar Highway. After the crash, they changed that policy, but the policy was not the issue. The issue was that the road existed in its current configuration, and that configuration allowed a bus with failing brakes to fall off the edge. The aftermath of the crash brought new attention to the highway. Local newspapers published detailed investigations. A documentary crew spent a summer filming the road's dangers. The Colorado Department of Transportation announced a $20 million safety improvement project for the section between Ouray and Silverton, including guardrails at the worst curves, rockfall mitigation, and better warning signs. The project was scheduled to begin in 2021, but it was delayed by environmental reviews and funding shortfalls. As of 2024, some guardrails have been installed, but large sections remain unprotected. The cost of a full barrier system is now estimated at $60 million. The state has not allocated the money. The families of the 4 victims filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the bus company, the driver, and the state of Colorado. The case was settled out of court 2 years later for an undisclosed amount. The terms of the settlement included an agreement that the bus company would not operate commercial vehicles on U.S. Route 550 between Durango and Ouray, but the road remains open to everyone else. What is the meaning of a road like this? It is a road that was built for a purpose that no longer exists. The mines are mostly closed. The silver rush is over. But the road remains because it connects 2 small towns that depend on tourism. It is a monument to a time when roads were built with risk as an accepted part of the journey. The danger is not an accident. It is a design feature. The million-dollar views come with $1 million price, and that price is measured in lives. When the road was constructed, the engineers did not have guardrails, rumble strips, or crash cushions. They had dynamite, horse-drawn scrapers, and a deadline. They carved a shelf into the side of a cliff because that was the only way across the mountain. They did not think about what would happen 100 years later when a bus full of tourists would lose its brakes on a curve that had not been changed since 1912. They could not have known, but we know now. The Million-Dollar Highway is not only a road. It is a case study in how infrastructure ages, how funding lags behind need, and how beauty can mask danger. Every year, visitors post photographs of the highway on social media, captioned with phrases like "the most amazing drive" or "scary but worth it." They do not see the cross markers at the bottom of the cliff. They do not hear the stories of the families who lost someone on that curve. They only see the color of the aspens, the shape of the peaks, the perfect light at sunset, and they drive, and sometimes they do not come back. At 11:44 a.m. on October 2, 2018, four people did not come back. Their names were Miguel, Carolina, Elena, and Jose. They were tourists. They were sitting in seats 12 through 15 on the left side of the bus. When the bus went over the edge, those seats were crushed against the rock face. The other passengers survived because the bus hit a grove of trees that slowed its descent. Miguel, Carolina, Elena, and Jose died instantly. Their families later learned that the bus had no working seatbelts. The driver did not tell them to buckle up. The road had no guardrail. The state had known about the hazard for years. The bus company had skipped the brake inspection, and none of that came together until it was too late. What happened after the crash is what always happens after a disaster on the million-dollar highway. There were hearings, there were promises, there were reports, there were headlines, then the news cycle moved on. The road opened again the next day, the tourists returned the following summer. The leaves turned orange and yellow, the curves stayed tight. The cliffs stayed open, the guardrail stayed missing, and the road kept claiming its toll. This is the story of why the million-dollar highway became America's most dangerous, beautiful road. It is not a story about one accident. It is a story about a system that tolerates preventable death because the cost of prevention is too high, the bureaucratic process is too slow, and the public memory is too short. It is a story about the gap between what we know and what we are willing to do about it. And it begins, as all dangerous roads do, with a decision to build something that outlasts its own safety. At 2:17 p.m. on September 5, 2013, a Ford Expedition with Nevada plates was descending the northbound side of US 550 between Ouray and Silverton. The vehicle carried a family of 5 from Las Vegas. The father was driving. The mother sat in the front passenger seat. 3 children were in the back. They were on a week-long road trip through Colorado's mountain passes. The father had driven mountain roads before, but never anything as steep or narrow as the million-dollar highway. He had not planned to take this route. A GPS suggested it as a shortcut to Telluride. The family had stopped for lunch in Durango, then headed north. By the time they reached the summit at Mola's Pass, the father noticed a burning smell. He thought it was another vehicle. He did not pull over. At 2:23 p.m., the expedition entered the first of the switchbacks near the Uncompahgre Gorge. The speed limit was 25 miles per hour. The father later told investigators he was going about 30. He pressed the brake pedal for the first curve and felt it sink toward the floor. The vehicle did not slow. He pumped the brakes, still no response. He tried the emergency brake, which was a foot pedal on the left. It did almost nothing. The transmission was an automatic. He shifted into lower gears, but the transmission hesitated. By the time the gear engaged, the vehicle was already going too fast for the next curve. At 2:25 p.m., the expedition left the roadway at approximately 40 miles per hour. It hit a low rock wall, flipped, and tumbled 200 feet down the embankment. The vehicle came to rest on its roof. The father survived with a broken collarbone. The mother and the youngest child, a 4-year-old, were killed. The 2 older children suffered severe injuries. What happened that afternoon was not a mystery. The father had experienced brake fade, a common phenomenon on long descents where friction generates heat, brake fluid boils, and hydraulic pressure is lost. The National Transportation Safety Board investigates aircraft and trains, but not single-vehicle car crashes on state highways. The Colorado State Patrol handled this one. Their report noted that the vehicle's brake fluid was found to be low and contaminated with moisture. The rear brake pads were worn to the metal. The vehicle had not been serviced in over 18,000 miles, but even properly maintained brakes can fail on this road. The grade from Mola's Pass to Ouray drops from 10,900 feet to 7,800 feet in about 24 miles. The steepest section, known as the million-dollar grade, has an average gradient of 7%, with some stretches hitting 9%. For a passenger vehicle with drum brakes or undersized rotors, that descent is a test of endurance. The father did not know to use engine braking. He did not know to stop and let the brakes cool. There was no sign that warned about brake overheating. There was no escape ramp. There was no place to pull over except a few narrow gravel shoulders that were not designed for emergency stops. The families of the mother and child filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Colorado Department of Transportation, arguing that the lack of an escape ramp and inadequate signage constituted a dangerous condition. The state argued that the road met all applicable safety standards for its classification and that the crash was caused by driver error and vehicle neglect. The case was dismissed in 2-0. The judge ruled that the state was immune from liability under the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, which protects public entities from lawsuits arising from the design and maintenance of highways. The law was written in the 1970s before the million-dollar highway became a tourist attraction. It assumes that drivers have a duty to adjust to road conditions. But what happens when the road itself is the hazard? The court did not answer that question. Since 2013, the Colorado Department of Transportation has installed several runaway truck ramp signs along the northbound descent, but the ramps themselves have not been built. The signs are blue with white lettering. They say runaway truck ramp 2 miles and then a quarter mile later runaway truck ramp 1 mile. Then the signs stop. There is no ramp. There is only a sign that tells you a ramp exists at some future point, but that point has not arrived. In 2018, after the bus crash, CDOT added another sign that reads "No Escape Ramp for 23 miles." That sign is accurate, but it does not help a driver who has already lost brakes. It informs them of the problem without solving it. The cost of building a single gravel escape ramp on the $1 million highway is estimated at $8 million. The ramp would need to be carved into the side of the mountain, roughly 600 feet long, with a rising gradient and deep gravel to stop vehicles. The state has studied 3 potential locations. One is just south of the Bear Creek Falls Overlook, where the road flattens briefly before the final plunge into Ouray. Another is near the old Ouray mine site, where a flat bench already exists. The third is at the bottom of the grade just before the Ouray city limits. Each site has environmental challenges. The Bear Creek location is within the Uncompahgre Gorge, a designated critical habitat for the Gunnison's prairie dog. The Ouray site has contaminated soil from decades of mining. The Ouray site would require cutting into a slope that is prone to rockfall. All 3 sites require federal environmental review because the highway crosses national forest land. The review process takes 3 to 5 years. Then construction would take another 2 years. The estimated completion date for the first escape ramp, if funded today, is 2030. In the meantime, vehicles continue to descend that grade. Every summer, the Colorado State Patrol reports an average of 1 brake failure incident per week on the $1 million highway. Most are resolved when the driver manages to steer into a rock face or a bank of loose dirt. A few end in injury or death. The State Patrol has a dedicated unit for the route, but their primary tool is education. They hand out pamphlets at the summit rest area. They stop rental cars and warn drivers about the descent. They tell people to use low gear. But many rental cars are equipped with automatic transmissions that do not have a low position, only a manual shift mode that few drivers understand. Some newer vehicles have hill descent control, but the system is not intuitive and rental companies do not provide instructions. The pamphlets are printed in English and Spanish. The crash that killed the Las Vegas mother and child involved a family whose primary language was Spanish. The father said he did not understand the pamphlet. Beyond individual crashes, the $1 million highway illustrates a deeper conflict between preservation and safety. The road is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as part of the Silverton-Durango Historic District. That designation, while not legally binding, creates a strong presumption against alterations that would change the road's character. Guardrails, especially the tall, modern steel beam variety, are considered visually intrusive. The Colorado Historical Foundation has opposed some guardrail installations on the grounds that they would obscure views and diminish the scenic experience. The compromise has been a low, cable-style guardrail that is less obtrusive but also less effective. The cable rail consists of 3 steel cables strung between posts. It is designed to absorb impact and redirect a vehicle, but it is not strong enough to stop a heavy bus or an SUV at high speed. On several curves, the cable rail has been broken by vehicles that went through it. In 2019, a pickup truck crashed through a section of cable rail near the Bear Creek Falls curve and fell 300 feet. The driver survived because the truck landed on its roof in deep snow. The cable rail was replaced with the same design. The state has considered closing the highway entirely during certain weather conditions, but the economic impact would be severe. The towns of Silverton and Ouray depend on summer tourism. Silverton has a year-round population of about 650 people. Its main street is lined with gift shops, cafes, and ATV rental businesses. Without the highway, tourists would have to take an alternate route that adds 2 hours of driving. Many would skip Silverton altogether. The town has no other major industry. The local school district nearly closed in 2020 due to declining enrollment. The highway is the single lifeline. The town's leaders have opposed any restriction on traffic, including a proposal to ban commercial buses from the road. They argue that buses bring visitors who spend money. They also note that the 2 major bus crashes in the road's history involved the same company, and that company changed its policy. They say the road is safe if drivers follow the rules, but the rules are not enforced. The Colorado State Patrol has 2 troopers assigned to the $1 million highway corridor. They work 8-hour shifts, usually during daylight hours. The highway is 25 miles long. At any given time, there may be hundreds of vehicles on the road. The troopers cannot be everywhere. They rely on radar and occasional checkpoints. They have no way stations for commercial vehicles. Truck drivers are supposed to carry a permit to use the highway, but the permits are available online and are not verified. In 2022, a dump truck from a construction company was pulled over near the summit. It was carrying a load of gravel that exceeded the weight limit by 12,000 pounds. The driver did not have a permit. The trooper issued a citation and ordered the truck to turn around, but the truck could not turn around on the narrow road. It had to drive to the next turnout, which was 3 miles downhill. The trooper followed. The truck made it to the turnout. But the incident raised a question: how many overloaded trucks drive this road every day without being checked? The answer is not known. The Million-Dollar Highway is also vulnerable to natural hazards. Rockfall is a constant threat. The cliffs above the road are composed of fractured volcanic rock and unstable sedimentary layers. Freeze-thaw cycles loosen rocks. Heavy rain saturates the soil. In May 2020, a boulder the size of a washing machine fell onto the road near the Red Mountain Pass summit. It missed a minivan by inches. The driver slammed on brakes and stopped. The boulder shattered on impact. The road was closed for 4 hours while a crew cleared debris. The Colorado Department of Transportation has a rockfall mitigation program that uses wire mesh, rock bolts, and scaling to stabilize slopes. But the program is underfunded. The highway has over 40 identified rockfall hazard zones. Only 12 have been treated. The rest are monitored, which means a state worker drives the highway once a week and looks for loose rocks. If something is found, a crew is dispatched. But the response time can be days and the road remains open. In the meantime, drivers are advised to watch for falling rocks. Signs at the summit say, "Watch for falling rock." That sign has been there since the 1950s. It does not say what to do when you see one. Despite all these dangers, the Million-Dollar Highway continues to attract drivers. The beauty is undeniable. The peaks rise to over 14,000 feet. The aspens turn gold in September. The San Juan Mountains are among the most photographed landscapes in the United States. Social media has amplified the appeal. Videos of the road show a drone following a car around a curve with a sheer drop. The caption says "Most dangerous road in America." The video gets millions of views. The comments range from fear to excitement. Almost no one comments on the fact that people have died there. The video is entertainment, not a warning. In October 2023, the Colorado Department of Transportation released a study titled US 550 Safety Corridor Analysis. The report examined crash data from 2015 to 2020. It found that the section between Ouray and Silverton had a crash rate 3 times higher than the state average for similar highways. The most common crash types were single-vehicle runoff road, sideswipe, and head-on collisions. The report recommended 17 safety improvements, including guardrails at 9 curves, improved signage at 6 locations, 2 new passing lanes, and 1 escape ramp. The total cost was estimated at $78 million. The state allocated $12 million for the first phase. The remaining $66 million is unfunded. The report noted that without full funding, the crash rate is expected to remain unchanged. The report was discussed at a public meeting in Durango in November 2023. Residents from Silverton and Ouray attended. Some argued that the improvements would ruin the scenic character. Others argued that the improvements would not stop reckless drivers. A woman whose husband died on the highway in 2019 stood up and said that her husband was a careful driver. He was driving a pickup truck with good brakes. He was going the speed limit. A deer jumped out. He swerved to avoid it. The truck went over the edge. She said that guardrails might have saved him. She asked why nothing had been done. The state officials said that funding was the issue. They thanked her for her testimony. The meeting ended. The Million-Dollar Highway is not a road that will be rebuilt or bypassed. It is a road that will be patched and signed and monitored until the money runs out or the next big crash forces a reckoning. Until then, every driver who takes that route makes a choice. They choose the view over the risk. They choose the speed over the caution. They choose the bend over the brake. And sometimes the road chooses for them. At 3:02 p.m. on August 14, 2022, a Chevrolet Suburban with Texas plates was climbing the southbound side of the Million-Dollar Highway heading from Silverton toward Durango. The driver was a retired couple from Houston. They had just visited the Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. They were following a motorhome. The motorhome was towing a small car. The grade was steep. The motorhome was slow. The couple decided to pass. They checked for oncoming traffic. The road was clear. They pulled into the opposite lane and accelerated. But the curve ahead was blind. The driver did not see the oncoming pickup truck until it was too late. The Suburban swerved back into its lane, but the motorhome had not slowed. The Suburban clipped the motorhome's rear bumper, then hit a guardrail, then went over the edge. The vehicle fell 150 feet. The husband was killed. The wife survived with spinal injuries. The pickup truck driver was unhurt. The motorhome driver did not stop. State Patrol later found the motorhome parked at a campground near Durango. The driver said he did not realize he had been hit. The road was closed for 5 hours. This crash was not about brakes. It was about visibility, speed, and the temptation of a scenic overtake. The road has no shoulders. The lane widths are 9 feet on most curves, 6 inches narrower than the modern standard. The center line is painted, but there is no rumble strip. The curves are designed for 25 miles per hour, but many drivers take them at 35 or 40. The combination of narrow lanes, blind curves, and impatient drivers is a recipe for head-on collisions. Between 2015 and 2022, there were 27 head-on crashes on the Million-Dollar Highway. 9 of them were fatal. The state has considered adding a centerline rumble strip, but engineers worry that the vibration could loosen rocks on the slope above. They have also considered installing median barriers, but the road is too narrow. There is no room. The only solution is to widen the road, which would require cutting into the cliff and filling the canyon. That would cost hundreds of millions of dollars and would likely be blocked by environmental laws. So the road stays the same and the crashes keep happening. The Million-Dollar Highway is a monument to a time when roads were built with risk as an accepted part of the journey, but the journey has changed. The vehicles are heavier, faster, and more numerous. The drivers are less experienced with mountain roads. The legal system protects the state from liability. The funding is never enough. The beauty endures, and so does the danger. This is why the Million-Dollar Highway became America's most dangerous, beautiful road. Not because of a single catastrophe. Not because of a single curve. But because of 100 small decisions made over 100 years that have accumulated into a road that asks too much of everyone who drives it. The road itself is not evil, it is simply old, and age without maintenance becomes a form of neglect. The cliffs do not care, the curves do not change, the guardrails when they are there are too few and too weak, the drivers keep coming, the views keep stunning, the price keeps being paid. At 4:17 p.m. on January 6, 2019, a tour bus operated by Silver Summit Transport began its descent from Red Mountain Pass southbound. The bus carried 27 passengers, most of them retirees on a winter tour of the San Juan Mountains. The driver was 62 years old with 18 years of mountain driving experience. He had driven this route dozens of times. The weather was clear, the road was dry, the temperature was 29 degrees. The bus rolled past the summit marker at 11,018 feet. Immediately, the driver noticed something wrong. The brake pedal felt soft. He pressed harder, the bus did not slow. He pumped the brakes, no response. The bus was gaining speed on the 9% grade. He yanked the parking brake lever, it did not hold. He downshifted the automatic transmission, but the engine brake was insufficient for a vehicle weighing 26,000 pounds fully loaded. The speed climbed from 30 to 40 to 50 miles per hour. The curves were approaching. The driver had a choice: ride the runaway truck ramp located at mile marker 94 or try to make the curves. He chose the ramp. The bus swerved onto the gravel escape lane at mile marker 94. The incline of the ramp is designed to stop runaway vehicles in about 300 feet. The bus hit the gravel bed at 48 miles per hour. It plowed through the loose material, decelerating hard. The passengers were thrown forward. The bus came to a stop after 260 feet. No one was seriously injured. The driver later told investigators that he had performed a pre-trip inspection that morning and the brakes felt normal. The bus had passed its annual inspection 3 months earlier. An inspection after the incident found a small leak in the air brake system's high-pressure line near the rear axle. The leak was so tiny it would not have shown in any standard test. It only became critical under sustained braking on a long grade. The mechanic who inspected the bus afterward said that if the driver had not hit that escape ramp, the bus would have rolled over at the next curve. There is no guardrail at that curve. The fall is 400 feet. This incident barely made the local news. No one died. The driver was praised for his quick thinking. The bus company replaced the airline. The highway remained open. But the story is not remarkable for what happened. It is remarkable for how close it came to a disaster that would have made national headlines. The Million-Dollar Highway has only 2 escape ramps on the entire route. Both are on the southbound side. There are none northbound. The ramps were built in the 1980s after a series of truck crashes. They have not been upgraded since. The gravel is replenished once a year. The ramp at mile marker 94 is 280 feet long. Engineering standards recommend a minimum of 400 feet for vehicles over 30,000 pounds. The state knows this. They have a study from 2010 that recommended lengthening both ramps. The study estimated the cost at $3.5 million. The money was never allocated. The ramps remain undersized. In 2016, a semi-trailer loaded with beer trucks missed the ramp and crashed through a guardrail. The driver survived with a broken leg. The guardrail had been installed in 1956. It was not designed to stop a 40,000-pound truck. The state replaced that section of guardrail after the crash, but only that section. The bus incident in 2019 raises a deeper question: how many near misses go unrecorded? The Colorado Department of Transportation records only crashes that involve injury, property damage over $1,000, or a vehicle being towed. A near miss like the bus escape does not meet that threshold. It becomes a footnote in the bus company's internal records. There is no central database for close calls on dangerous roads. The warning signs accumulate only when someone dies. In March 2021, a driver from Arizona in a rented campervan lost control on the same southbound grade at 2:11 p.m. The van went over the edge at mile marker 96, a curve known locally as the S-curve. The van flipped twice before coming to rest on a rock ledge 80 feet below. 2 people inside, a mother and her teenage son, were killed. The father survived with a concussion. The van had been rented in Denver 3 days earlier. The investigation found that the driver had no mountain driving experience. The van's brake pads were worn to 50% of their original thickness. The rental company's policy required replacing pads at 20%, no violation. The van's engine brake was available but was not engaged. The driver told investigators he did not know it existed. The curve has a posted speed of 15 miles per hour. The van entered it at 28. The father later sued the rental company, the state, and the county. The case was dismissed on sovereign immunity grounds. The state argued that the highway design was acceptable under current standards. The judge agreed. The family received nothing. How many more crashes must occur before the state reallocates funds? That question was asked at a 2022 hearing of the Colorado Transportation Commission. The director of the Department of Transportation replied that the department manages over 9,000 miles of highway. The million-dollar highway is 25 miles. It accounts for less than 0.3% of the total network, but it accounts for 12% of all fatal crashes in the region over the past decade. The director was asked if that disparity justified a higher priority. He said the department allocates funds based on crash frequency, volume, and cost-effectiveness analysis. Under that formula, US 550 does not rank in the top 100 projects for the state. The hearing ended without action. The irony is that the very danger that makes the road popular also makes it difficult to fund improvements. Tourists come because of the thrill. The thrill is derived from the risk. If the road were widened, barriered, and straightened, it would lose its identity. The local economies of Ouray, Silverton, and Durango rely on tourism that is driven by the road's reputation. A 2023 economic impact study commissioned by the Ouray Chamber of Commerce found that 68% of visitors cited scenic driving as the primary reason for their trip. Of those, 43% specifically mentioned the million-dollar highway's reputation as a must-see dangerous road. The study concluded that any significant safety improvements that reduced the perceived danger could lower visitor numbers by at least 15%. That would mean a loss of approximately $22 million in annual tourism revenue across the 3 counties. The safety improvements proposed by the state would cost $78 million. The tourism loss over a decade would be $220 million. The math does not encourage action, so the road remains a carefully managed gamble. The state does what it can with the money it has. It installs warning signs, paints lines, and inspects guardrails. It runs public awareness campaigns telling drivers to use lower gears, check brakes, and never pass on curves. The campaigns have been running since the 1970s. They have not changed behavior. In 2024, the Colorado Department of Transportation launched a digital campaign using geofencing. When a vehicle approaches the highway from Silverton, a driver's phone can receive a notification. You are entering US 550, a dangerous mountain road. Drive carefully. The notification appears once and disappears. The system cannot tell if the driver is using a phone or not. It cannot tell if the vehicle is a car or a truck. It cannot tell if the driver is a local or a tourist. It is a digital version of a sign. It might help, it might not. The department did not fund a study to measure its effect. The most telling statistic about the million-dollar highway is not the number of deaths. It is the number of bodies that have never been found. In 1958, a car carrying 3 mining engineers from Telluride went off the road near the Uncompahgre Gorge. Search crews found the car at the bottom of the gorge, but only 2 bodies were inside. The 3rd engineer was never recovered. The canyon is so deep and the slope so unstable that ground searches are often impossible. In 1972, a van carrying pottery from a Santa Fe gallery plunged into the same gorge. The driver and 2 passengers were declared dead based on debris, but bodies were never found. In 2004, a solo driver from Missouri lost control at night near the Alpine Loop Junction. The vehicle was found 2 days later, wedged between trees 300 feet down. The driver's remains were never located. Law enforcement assumes they were scavenged by animals. The highway has at least 6 documented cases of missing bodies. The actual number is likely higher because not every off-road accident is immediately reported. The memorial crosses that line the highway are not just symbols of grief. They are reminders of a system that has accepted fatality as part of the natural cycle of the road. The crosses go up, they fade, they fall. The state does not replace them. They are not official. They are placed by families. The oldest cross still standing is near mile marker 912. It marks the site of a 1987 crash that killed a 23-year-old woman from Oklahoma who was driving alone. The cross is made of welded rebar with a rusted heart. It has been there for 37 years. It is maintained by an anonymous resident of Silverton who drives past it every week and stops to straighten it. He is not a relative. He never knew her. He said in a 2023 interview that he does it because somebody should remember her. That cross will rust away eventually. The road will not remember her. What will remain is the question, why do we keep driving this road? The answer may not be found in engineering reports or crash statistics. It may be found in the human desire to test oneself against something larger. The cliff is indifferent. The curve is neutral. The driver is the only variable, and that variable is unpredictable. The state can plan for predictable failures, brake fade, rockfall, snow, ice. It cannot plan for human judgment. The million-dollar highway reveals the gap between what we can control and what we choose not to control. Every driver who arrives at the summit and looks down into the canyon makes a silent calculation. The view is worth the risk. For most, it is. For some, it is not. For a few dozen, the calculation was wrong. At 5:08 p.m. on September 23, 2023, a motorcycle carrying a man and a woman from Ohio approached the same curve that took the rental van in 2020. The sun was low. The asphalt was warm. The rider took the curve too fast. The motorcycle slid on loose gravel near the shoulder. The passenger was thrown off near the guardrail. The rider and the motorcycle went over the edge. The rescue team rappelled down 200 feet. They found the rider alive but with severe internal injuries. The passenger had only scratches. The rider died on the way to the hospital. The passenger later said they had been looking at the map on a phone mounted to the handlebars. The map showed the road, it did not show the edge. This is why the million-dollar highway remains a question without a complete answer. The data is there, the recommendations are there, the money is not. The will is split between preservation and protection. The road is too beautiful to change. It is too deadly to ignore. So it exists in a state of suspended negotiation. Every new day brings a new driver, a new curve, a new chance to test the limits. Every day that ends without a death is a small victory. Every day that begins with a crash is a small tragedy. The road does not distinguish, it only waits. At 7:14 a.m. on October 15, 2024, a snowplow operator employed by the Colorado Department of Transportation pulled his truck onto US 550 near the summit of Red Mountain Pass. The temperature was 26 degrees Fahrenheit. A thin layer of black ice had formed overnight on the shaded sections of the road. The operator was assigned to clear the stretch from mile marker 88 to mile marker 98, the most avalanche-prone segment of the highway. He had driven this route for 19 years. He knew every curve, every drainage ditch, every spot where frost lingered longest. He completed the run without incident. At 9:03 a.m., a tourist from Texas driving a rented SUV approached the same stretch. The ice had been treated with brine, but the brine had frozen again because the temperature had not risen above 30 degrees. The tourist hit a patch of ice near the same location the operator had just passed. The vehicle slid sideways, struck the guardrail, and came to rest with the front wheels hanging over the edge. The driver was unhurt. He climbed out through the passenger door. He later told a deputy that he had not seen any warning about ice because the electronic sign at the entrance to the highway was displaying a message about wildlife crossings. The sign had been set to that message at 6 a.m. and had not been updated when the temperature dropped. The incident was minor. No one was injured. No vehicle was lost, but it illustrated a recurring failure in the communication between the road and the driver. The state operates 23 variable message signs along US 550 between Durango and Ouray. The signs are programmed remotely from a regional traffic management center in Grand Junction. On any given day, the signs cycle through preset messages: avalanche warning, rockfall advisory, brake check recommended, fog ahead, wildlife crossing, chain requirement, road closed. The messages are not updated by real-time sensor data. They are updated by human operators who monitor weather cameras and road conditions. On the morning of October 15, 2024, the operator in Grand Junction was also monitoring 3 other mountain passes. The ice advisory was not entered until 8:47 a.m., but the sign at the entrance to the highway did not receive the update because of a communication error between the sign and the central server. The error was detected at 9:14 a.m. after the tourist had already crashed. The sign was displaying the wildlife crossing message until a technician manually reset it at 9:37 a.m. The state later reported that the sign had a known software bug that caused it to revert to a default message when a communication timeout occurred. The bug had been identified in 2020. A fix was scheduled for the 2025 maintenance cycle. The road continued to operate with known system gaps because the budget for sign upgrades had been allocated to guardrail replacement on a different segment. The guardrail replacement had been delayed due to a shortage of steel. The engineering of the million-dollar highway is not simply a matter of width and curves. It is a matter of material science, geology, and human factors. The roadbed itself is built on decomposed granite and glacial till, materials that shift when wet. The subgrade absorbs water from snowmelt and rain. When the water freezes, it expands. When it thaws, the ground becomes soft. The road can buckle or sink. In 1998, a section near Ouray dropped 6 inches overnight. The state closed the road for 3 weeks while crews drilled drainage pipes and installed a geotextile fabric beneath the asphalt. That repair cost $2.7 million and lasted 9 years. By 2007, the same section had started to fail again. The state applied a different method, injecting a cement slurry deep into the soil. That repair cost $4.1 million and has held for 17 years as of 2024. The state estimates that similar failures will occur at other sections as the climate warms and the freeze-thaw cycle intensifies. Climate change is altering the road's risk profile. The average winter temperature in the San Juan Mountains has risen by 3.4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1970. Snowfall totals have declined by 20%, but the snow that does fall melts faster and runs off quickly. This increases the frequency of debris flows, landslides, and flash floods that can wash out culverts or deposit rocks onto the road. In July 2023, a debris flow triggered by a sudden thunderstorm dumped an estimated 200 tons of rock and mud onto US 550 near mile marker 9 for. The flow occurred at 5:22 p.m. on a Friday, the busiest time of the week for tourist traffic. A couple from Illinois in a minivan drove directly into the debris. The vehicle was buried up to the windows. The couple was rescued by a passing truck driver who used a shovel from his toolbox to dig them out. They suffered minor injuries. The road remained closed for 11 hours. The Colorado Geological Survey has mapped 47 active debris flow basins along the 50-mile corridor between Durango and Ouray. Of these, 23 have direct pathways to the road. The state has installed concrete barriers at 9 of the highest-risk crossings. The remaining 14 remain unprotected because the cost of barriers at each site exceeds $800,000. The state is evaluating a remote detection system that would use seismic sensors to detect debris flows before they reach the road. The system was tested in 2022 on a single basin near Silverton. It worked correctly, detecting a small flow 30 seconds before it crossed the road. But the system cost $1.2 million to install and requires annual maintenance of $90,000. The state has not expanded it. The question of who pays for safety on the million-dollar highway is not new. In 1913, when the road was being built, the county commissioners of San Juan County proposed a bond issue to fund guardrails on the steepest sections. The bond was defeated by voters, who argued that the road was not intended for fast travel and that drivers should be responsible for their own safety. That argument has persisted for more than a century. It appears in public comments on every proposed safety improvement. In 2021, the Colorado Department of Transportation held a virtual public hearing about a proposal to install a center median barrier on a 2-mile section near the Uncompahgre Gorge. The barrier would have prevented head-on collisions, but required narrowing the lane width from 11 feet to 9 feet. Several residents of Ouray objected, saying that reducing lane width would increase the risk of scraping against the guardrail. A retired truck driver testified that the barrier would make it impossible for large vehicles to pass each other. The proposal was withdrawn. The tension between safety and accessibility is amplified by the fact that the road is not just a tourist attraction. It is a lifeline for the towns it connects. Silverton has a population of approximately 600. It has no hospital, no urgent care clinic, no pharmacy. The nearest emergency room is in Durango, 60 miles away. For residents of Silverton, the road is their ambulance route. When the road closes, medical evacuations must be done by helicopter, which costs the county an average of $12,000 per flight. In 2023, the county spent $144,000 on helicopter medical transports. That amount exceeds the annual budget for road maintenance in Silverton. The same road that delivers tourists and their money also delivers risk. The local economy is dependent on the road being open, but also on the road being dangerous enough to attract visitors. This contradiction is not lost on the people who live there. In a 2024 survey conducted by the University of Colorado Boulder, 73% of residents in Ouray County said they believed the road was unsafe. 59% said they had personally witnessed a crash or a near miss. Yet when asked whether they would support a significant speed limit reduction or a mandatory chain requirement year-round, only 31% said yes. The reason most frequently cited was that slower travel times would discourage tourists. The road's danger is its brand. The brand drives the economy. The economy cannot afford to weaken the brand. At 11:48 p.m. on December 16, 2023, a delivery driver for a package company was making a late run from Durango to Montrose. He was driving a box truck with a gross weight of 12,000 pounds. The highway was dry. The temperature was 31 degrees. He had driven this route at night before. He knew that deer often crossed near mile marker 86. He was traveling at 45 miles per hour, which is 10 miles over the posted limit for trucks on that section. As he came around a left-hand curve, his headlights illuminated a group of 5 deer standing in the middle of the road. He braked. The truck's anti-lock brakes activated. The steering wheel pulled to the right as the tires lost grip on a patch of frost he had not seen. The truck went off the road, struck a boulder, and rolled onto its side. The driver was wearing his seatbelt. He suffered a broken collarbone and a concussion. The deer were not hit. The truck spilled its cargo of consumer electronics across the slope. Recovery crews had to use a crane to lift the truck back onto the road. The state later determined that the frost patch had formed because the road surface temperature was 2 degrees colder than the air temperature, a condition that weather forecast models had not predicted. The state does not have road temperature sensors on US 550. It relies on National Weather Service data, which is based on general conditions, not localized measurements. The crash was classified as a single-vehicle accident with no fatality. It did not appear in any official tally of highway deaths, but the driver later filed a lawsuit against the state, alleging that the lack of temperature sensors and the failure to deploy brine trucks before midnight constituted negligence. The case is pending. If the driver wins, it could set a precedent requiring the state to invest in real-time road temperature monitoring along the entire corridor. The legal dimension of the million-dollar highway is an evolving story. In the past 10 years, at least 8 lawsuits have been filed against the state of Colorado related to crashes on US 550. None have succeeded. The state is protected by the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, which generally bars claims for injuries caused by road defects unless the defect is extreme and the state had actual notice. The courts have interpreted extreme narrowly. In 2019, a judge ruled that a guardrail that ended 15 feet above a 400-foot drop did not constitute an extreme defect because the guardrail was installed according to a design standard that had been considered acceptable when built in 1955. The standard has since been revised, but the state is not required to retrofit existing guardrails. The judge wrote that the state's failure to update the guardrail was a policy decision, not a negligent act. The plaintiff appealed. The appeal was denied. What the lawsuits reveal is not legal liability but legal absence. The road exists in a gap between what is safe and what is required. The state is not required to make the road safe. It is required to maintain it in a condition that does not create an unreasonable risk of harm. Unreasonable risk is a legal term that has been defined by decades of case law. On the million-dollar highway, the courts have consistently found that the risk is reasonable. The public knows the road is dangerous. The warning signs are posted. The driver's choice to travel the road is voluntary. The state's duty is limited. That legal framework may seem cold, but it reflects a philosophy that underpins many decisions about the road. The road is not a public service that guarantees safety. It is a public amenity that accepts risk as part of its identity. The state's role is to inform, not to protect. The driver's role is to decide, not to demand. This philosophy has been challenged by families who have lost loved ones, but the legislature has not changed the law. At 4:36 p.m. on June 21, 2024, a 16-year-old driver from New Mexico lost control of her family's sedan on a curve near mile marker 90. The sedan had 4 occupants: the driver, her mother, her younger brother, and her grandmother. They were on a vacation to Durango and had decided to take the scenic route. The mother had been driving, but asked her daughter to take over so she could look at a map. The daughter had been driving for just under 5 minutes when the family's car drifted toward the edge. The mother yelled. The daughter overcorrected. The car crossed the center line and went into the cliff face. The car came to rest against the rock wall. All 4 survived. The grandmother suffered a broken hip. The driver suffered a concussion. The car was totaled. The family spent 2 nights in a hotel in Silverton before renting another car to continue their trip. They did not file a lawsuit. They did not complain to the state. They told a local newspaper that they considered themselves lucky. The newspaper article included a photograph of the damaged car with the cliff behind it. The article received 112 comments online. Most said the family was lucky. Some said the daughter should not have been driving. A few said the road should be closed. None of the comments changed anything. The road remains open because the calculus has never changed. The benefit of access outweighs the cost of danger. The cost is measured in lives, but the benefit is measured in dollars, and dollars can be counted more easily. The Colorado Department of Transportation publishes an annual report on the economic value of US 550. The report estimates that the highway generates $7 million in direct tourism spending per year in Ouray County alone. It supports approximately 300 jobs. It connects communities that would otherwise be isolated. It provides a route for emergency services. It allows trucks to deliver goods to remote mining operations. The report does not assign a dollar value to a human life. If it did, using the standard federal value of a statistical life, which in 2024 was approximately $12.5 million, the average of 3 deaths per year would equate to $37.5 million in annual loss. That figure exceeds the tourism benefit by a factor of 5. The report does not include that calculation. The omission is not an oversight, it is a choice. The state's analysis uses a different metric: fatalities per vehicle mile traveled. By that measure, US 550 is not the most dangerous road in Colorado. That designation belongs to a stretch of US 285 in the central part of the state, which has a higher death rate per mile. But US 285 is a 4-lane highway with wide shoulders and median barriers. The comparison ignores the subjective experience of danger. The million-dollar highway feels dangerous because the margin of error is narrow and the visual feedback is terrifying. The driver sees the edge. The driver feels the drop. That feeling is part of the experience. State has built its tourism campaign around that feeling. In 2022, the Colorado Tourism Office released a 30-second advertisement titled "The Road That Tests You." The ad shows a driver gripping the steering wheel, then cuts to a wide shot of the highway hugging the cliff. The voiceover says, "Some roads just get you from place to place. This one asks who you are." The ad was viewed 6 million times on social media. The question the ad does not ask is whether the road should be different. That question will not be answered by engineering alone. It will be answered by the culture that surrounds the road. As long as the road is seen as a challenge to be conquered, drivers will try to conquer it. As long as it is seen as a scenic marvel, tourists will come to gape. As long as it is seen as a necessary connection, residents will use it. The road will change only when the sum of those forces shifts. On October 27, 2024, the Colorado Department of Transportation announced a new pilot program for US 550. The program will install 2 automated speed enforcement cameras on the most dangerous curves near the Uncompahgre Gorge. Drivers exceeding the posted speed limit by 10 miles per hour or more will receive a citation by mail. The program is opposed by local legislators who argue that speed cameras are an invasion of privacy and will harm tourism. The program is supported by safety advocates who say that speed is a factor in more than half of the highway's fatal crashes. The cameras are scheduled to begin operation in June 2025. Their effectiveness will be evaluated after 2 years. The road will keep its curves, the cliffs will keep their height, the drivers will keep their choices. And the highway will keep its title as the most dangerous, beautiful road in America, not because it has to be, but because no one has yet found a way to make it both safe and beautiful at the same time. The search continues. The road remains.